This is the story of the life of Paul. But before he was Paul, his name was Saul. Now Saul was a Jewish leader, also known as a Pharisee. But being a Jewish leader, he despised Christians. He despised Christians so much that he went as far as putting them in prison and stoning them to death. But this is not the end of his story. God had bigger plans for this guy. One day, Saul went on a journey with his men down toward Damascus. Their plans were to arrest every Christian they could find, when suddenly a bright light appeared from nowhere, and Saul fell to the ground. And the voice of God said, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" Saul replied, "Who are you, Lord?" "I am Jesus, the one whom you are persecuting. Go now into the city. There you will be told what to do." When Saul stood from the ground, he was completely blind. His companions led him to the city, and for 3 days he did not eat or drink, and he hardly slept. On the 3rd day, a man of God named Ananias came and laid his hands upon Saul's eyes, and Saul regained his sight. He was then baptized and began his life again as a follower of Christ. As a sign of this great change in Saul's life, he changed his name from Saul to Paul. People, however, were hesitant to accept him, for he was once a murderer of Christians, and now explained openly that he was one. But that did not stop him. He began to teach in the synagogues and lead people to Christ. Paul spent about 8 years learning about the Christian faith and teaching others how to live it out, before God called him to his first missionary journey in 47 AD. Paul's first missionary journey began in Antioch with his partner Barnabas. They started in Antioch and moved their way through Seleucia, Cyprus, Perga, and Lystra. They finished out their journey back at Antioch, where they explained to their church there about the mighty things that God had done through them in all their cities. During his first missionary journey, Paul was taken outside of the city and stoned. The people intended to kill him, but God had different plans. Paul didn't die, but instead got up and walked back into the very same city that he had just been thrown out of, and began preaching and teaching to all who lived there. Paul's second missionary journey began in Antioch with a new partner named Silas, another man of God. Paul and Silas traveled to many different cities, including Syria, Derbe and Lystra, Troas, Philippi, Thessalonica, and Corinth, before they finally made their way back to Antioch, to their church, where they explained to their congregation all that God had done through them and those who were now won over to the Christian faith. Paul's third missionary journey began in Antioch However, this time he traveled alone, and little did Paul know that this would be his last missionary journey. He started out by going to Galatia, to Ephesus and Macedonia, Greece, Troas, Miletus, Tyre, Ptolemais, Caesarea, and Jerusalem. Paul was then thrown into prison in Jerusalem. Paul remained under Roman guard from 57 AD to 62 AD. He then was released and continued his missionary work for 4 more years, until he was rearrested under Rome in 66 AD. It was during this time in prison that Paul lost his life for the sake of Christ. But Paul's story is far from over. The many churches Paul established on his journeys began to send off missionaries of their own. The Christian faith began to spread rapidly across the country, until it became one of the most well-known religions of that time. During his life, Paul wrote 13 letters to the churches that he established. The letters were written to encourage these new churches in their faith. The letters later became the epistles of Paul in the New Testament of the Holy Bible. Today, we know these letters as Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd Timothy, Titus, and Philemon. Because of Paul's passion for the gospel of Christianity, the religion spread rapidly across the entire Western world. And 2,000 years later, it is still making its way all the way around the globe. In 2 Corinthians 6 of the Holy Bible, Paul writes, "As servants of God, we commend ourselves in every way, in great endurance, in troubles, hardships and distress, in beatings, imprisonments, and riots, in hard work, sleepless nights, and hunger, and in the power of God." Because of Paul and his passion for the Christian faith, the religion that started 2,000 years ago is still growing today. And his passion is what most Christians still strive for.